and welcome. I'm glad to see you were able to find somewhere to park. Sometimes I have to come in 45 minutes early just to find a place to park, so I'm glad you were able to find a spot. My name is Amy. I'm one of the personal trainers here, so I tend to focus most of my time on one-on-one sessions with clients who are looking to pursue certain goals in fitness and in their general day-to-day lives. Although I also sometimes do sessions as well with small groups of 2 to 3 people, and occasionally I run group fitness classes over there in our group fitness class room as well. So I will be doing your consultation with you today. We'll try to find out a little bit more about you so that I can create a much more structured and focused program for you and your goals. So it seems a little bit clinical in the sense of I'm asking a lot of questions and writing a lot of things down and that sort of thing, but I'm trying to make it very casual and very friendly, and it really is just so that I can make your program as best as I can for you. So feel free to ask any questions you have along the way. Today we will just be focusing on the paperwork that involves some health history and some little questionnaires regarding previous physical activity and any limitations or specific goals that you have. And then in our next session we will be doing a physical assessment. So I will do things like take blood pressure and your heart rate. We'll do some passive movement tests as well, and that allows me to see if there's anything that needs to be addressed up front before we get into some specific programming. So we'll start with our paperwork. If it's okay with you, I'd like to stay out here and just sit at our table where we are now, here in the lobby. We do have an assessment room. It's a very small, confined space, and I do find that it feels very clinical and a little bit claustrophobic. So if you're okay with it, we'll just stay right here to conduct our consultation, if that's okay. Great. So I've already set up a little folder for you. And inside I have a few sheets that will contain some questions that I'll need to ask you. So if you see me looking away from you, I'm just writing a few things down. So I'm not trying to be rude. I am listening, I promise. Okay? So let me pull these papers out. So firstly, I'm just going to grab my tablet here. Now on your way in, the receptionist would have had you fill out a physical activity readiness questionnaire. Is that correct? Okay. So, even though you've already filled this out, I always like to go over it again with any potential or current client. Sometimes the questions can be a little bit vague, or if you have any questions about what the questionnaire is asking, then we can clarify as well. So, the Physical Activity Readiness Questionnaire is a series of questions that allows the trainer and the client to determine if it would be best if a client gets clearance from a doctor or another health professional before pursuing physical activity, before starting a moderate program of physical activity. So some of these questions probably won't apply to you. They are yes or no questions. If something seems a little bit vague, then just let me know and I'll clarify for you. So they're just yes or no. And there's no judgment, there's no score or anything like that. It's just to make sure that you are ready and cleared to begin physical activity, okay? So your first question, has your doctor ever said that you have a heart condition and that you should only do physical activity recommended by a doctor? Okay. Do you feel pain in your chest when you do physical activity? In the past month, have you had chest pain when you were not doing physical activity? Okay. Do you lose your balance because of dizziness? Or do you ever lose consciousness? Okay. Do you have a bone or joint problem? For example, in your back or your knees or your hip, that could be made worse by a change in your physical activity. Yeah, that's a vague question, isn't it? So, a bone or joint problem could be things like osteoarthritis or osteoporosis, or any sort of tendinopathy. If you have kind of a nagging injury in a joint, that might also be something that we need to consider getting clearance for before pursuing physical activity. Okay. Is your doctor currently prescribing drugs, for example, water pills, for your blood pressure or heart condition? Do you know of any other reason why you should not do physical activity? Okay. So, you answered no to all questions. If you answered no honestly to all physical activity readiness questionnaire questions, you can be reasonably sure that you can start becoming much more physically active, beginning slowly and building up gradually, which is, of course, how we approach things around here. This is the safest and easiest way to go. You can also take part in a fitness appraisal. This is an excellent way to determine your basic fitness so that you can plan the best way for you to live actively. It is also recommended that you have your blood pressure evaluated. If your reading is over 144/94, talk with your doctor before you start becoming much more physically active. So, I will not be testing your blood pressure today. We will save that for our next session. I'll have you bring workout attire and things like that. And so blood pressure will be part of that assessment. So we don't need to worry about that today. Okay. So there is a side note here as well. It says delay becoming much more active if you are not feeling well because of a temporary illness, such as a cold or fever, or if you are or may be pregnant, we do recommend that you talk to your doctor before you start becoming more physically active than you already are. So if you were not active and then you become pregnant, we do recommend that you seek the clearance of a doctor before pursuing physical activity. So again, we won't be doing any assessments or any movement today. So if you aren't feeling well, that's perfectly okay. Not a big deal. So this is the same copy that you submitted to the receptionist at the front. She's just scanned it and put it under my account here so that I have access to it. And I see that you've already signed and dated. That's perfect. So, according to the PARQ, this questionnaire, you are ready to become physically active. Perfect. So let me just reach into your folder here. I'm going to grab a blank health history form and we'll go through the questions together. And again, this does seem rather extensive, I know. It seems a little bit like an interrogation at first. But the reason that we take such a detailed analysis of your lifestyle and your health history and things is so that we can recognize and address any issues or health problems that may appear or that you are at risk for, and that can kind of guide how I program for you. And also, if there's any activities that you enjoy or that you're experienced in, we might be able to program some pieces of movement that reflect that as well. So I always like to take a collaborative approach when I design programs. I like to make sure that my clients enjoy what they're doing and that the program really reflects them and not me. Sometimes trainers can fall into this rut where we emphasize our own experiences and our own specialties instead of what the client needs and what they want and what's best for them. So having a very detailed health history form kind of takes the program out of my body, puts it into yours. Okay, so So if I could get your full name. Okay. And your date of birth. Great. Now I ask here for an occupation. That can be a title or a description of the work that you do. Sometimes the employment that you have kind of guides the activities that you do throughout the day. So for example, if you work on a farm, there may be certain movements that you're more accustomed to, or there may be certain areas of weakness that we need to address. So knowing what somebody does for a living can actually give me a very good idea up front of what that person may need in a program before we even start to move at all. So okay, we're going to save height and blood pressure and things like that for next time. We'll do the full measurement spectrum there. Okay. So the next portion is asking about particular risk factors for cardiovascular disease. Do you smoke? Okay. Do you regularly take your own blood pressure at the drugstore? They usually have the little chair you can sit in and put your arm in. And do you remember what it said? Okay, so I'm going to write that down. It sounds like it's normal, so we won't worry too much about that. But it's good to kind of have an idea of what the trend is. That allows us to gauge improvements. And again, I will be taking your blood pressure next time we meet. Is there any history of cardiovascular disease or heart attacks or anything of that nature, angina, stroke, those sorts of things in your family? Okay. And have you been diagnosed with any existing medical conditions? Anything from anemia, depression or seasonal affective disorder, anything like that, broad spectrum? Could be anything. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't be able to be physically active, but again, it does kind of give me an idea of the approach that might be required for you. Do you know if you have any allergies at all? Okay. Now this next question, it asks about injuries. So specifically it's asking about current injuries. But I would also like to know if you have any past injuries that are affecting your current function. So any nagging injuries or tendinitis or anything like that. Okay. Restricted movement. Yeah. That happens a lot when we sprain ankles or wrists, oftentimes because we try to keep them immobile. That can actually create a bit of a mobility restriction that can be addressed, no problem. Okay, so the next few questions are a bit of a hodgepodge. Do you currently have a physical activity routine? That could be anything from Olympic caliber weightlifting to walking 3 times a week just to get some fresh air. Those would both count, and anything in between those two things also counts. If you play any sports or anything like that. Okay. And how often would you say that you do that? Okay. That's good. That's a really good base. Really good base of movement. Perfect. So getting into some lifestyle questions. Again, there's no score. I'm not scoring you. It's just to get a broader picture of how things are in your life. Remember that working with a personal trainer is a commitment. So I want to make sure that I don't overcommit you based on the other things that you have going on in your life. So, would you say that you get a decent amount of sleep? Do you feel rested when you wake up in the mornings? Okay. Now, I suspect this might be required as part of your job, but do you get regular medical checkups? Every year or 2 years? Okay. It doesn't have to be a super thorough checkup. Sometimes they just take your blood pressure, listen with a stethoscope, and then check your reflexes and you're out the door. It still counts. Would you say that you get 3 to 5 servings of vegetables every day? It's weird to count, isn't it? That's good. Vegetables are really expensive these days. So I actually find that that is often answered no by some clients because it's so expensive to eat that many vegetables. So I guess this is a good time to start growing your own, isn't it? And would you say that you make a conscious effort to eat healthy? Great. Nothing wrong with moderation. Do you think you are stressed? Do you have a lot of stress in your life? Okay. And the stress that you do have, what are some of the ways that you have developed to deal with and cope with that stress? Okay. There are some great guided meditations on YouTube, aren't there? I know. Yeah, that's awesome. Would you consider yourself to be a happy person? Great. I would still work with you if you weren't. But it's good to hear that you are a happy person. Do you consume alcohol? Okay. Now, the more important part of this question, of course, is how much do you consume? So there's a few different ways you could answer that question. If you find that you don't drink at all from Monday to Friday, and then Friday and Saturday you just binge and drink way more than you should, then that is one way to answer that question. If you just have 1 or 2 drinks a few times a week, then that's another way. So there's lots of different ways you can answer that question. Okay. Do you take any supplements currently? Whether that's sports supplements or just vitamins or anything like that? Okay. Perfect. It is a rather exhaustive list of questions, isn't it? I know. Like I said, though, it really does help me create programs that are much more specific to the client. So, okay, we're going to get into some goals, just to kind of lay down some preliminary ideas for different directions we could take with programming, different things to work towards. But first, if I could get the name of your family doctor and their phone number. If you don't have that on you, that's fine. I'll just ask you to bring that information with you during our next assessment. Okay, don't remember their phone number. I don't remember my doctor's phone number either. It's okay. And can I get an emergency contact name and number as well? Okay. And their relation to you? Okay. So we already touched very briefly on exercise history. So now I'd like to know if there are any sports that you played when you were younger, or programs that you've tried years ago or recently, any exercises or activities that you particularly enjoyed, or that might be something you'd be looking into pursuing. Yeah. And why did you have a hard time sticking to that? Or what was the reason for kind of severing the relationship with that program? No results, eh? That happens a lot. I find with internet programs, they can be very good for beginners or somebody who's just looking to get some variety, but in all honesty, working with someone to develop a program specific to your own goals is really the best way to go. Because we go through that entire assessment process, we put time frames on your goals. It's just a lot easier to kind of laser focus your program to your goals by working with someone in person. So, while results often are also influenced by a person's lifestyle and a person's diet, rest assured that your program that we create together will be as focused on your goals as it can be. I really have your goals and your well-being in mind. So I like to see my clients succeed, which might sound counterintuitive, right? Because as soon as my client succeeds and they decide they don't need me anymore, then I guess I'm not making money anymore, am I? And I have to go find a new client to do the same thing. But I think you'll find with my approach, I really try to teach as much as I guide. I'm not the kind of person to keep secrets from my clients. I want to teach you so that you can learn and eventually be confident enough to go out on your own and pursue physical activity and exercise in the context of your goals on your own. So, bittersweet, I suppose. Okay, so let's talk about goals. Now, it's okay if you don't have specific goals right now. If you aren't really sure how to word something, that's okay. I'm just going to jot down a few keywords, okay? And after we do our physical assessment, the next time that we meet, we will solidify and strengthen these goals by making them more specific and measurable, okay? Give you some time frames to work towards, and we'll set up some ways that we can actually measure your progress, okay? So just throw some keywords out there at me. What would you like to achieve by starting a new physical activity and exercise program? It can be anything. Some people are nearing middle age and they're worried about bone density, and that's sometimes a word that gets thrown at me. Osteoporosis is a scary word that sometimes I hear. You know, everything from weight loss and fat loss to gaining muscle. Sometimes runners come to me and they want to strengthen their ankles and their lower leg. So there's lots of different things, keywords that we could use. Just fire away. That's great. That's a lot of variety. Variety is good. It is. I do try to create a very whole, complete program that addresses all aspects of the fitness spectrum. We don't like to only focus on one thing. And what areas would you like to emphasize in that context? Strength or balance or mobility, cardiovascular endurance? What are you looking to emphasize? What do you think is the least strong fitness domain right now in your life? So that is the health history form. That gives me some great ideas, really good overview that I can start working with. So the last question that I have for you from the health history form isn't really about history at all. So now I'd like to discuss with you what times or days of the week you might be available for us to meet, how often you would like for us to meet, which days are best for you, and things like that. Now, I do recommend that we meet at least twice a week. Now, some people are meeting with personal trainers 4 times a week or 3. I do recommend a minimum of twice a week. Okay, so we can start with that if you like, if you feel like time is going to be an issue in terms of commitment and sticking to your program. We can start with 2, and if you feel like you would like to boost that number and you can make it in a little bit more frequently, then we can move up to a 3rd session. That's fine. Okay, so we'll go with 2. And what days are best for you? Okay. Does it matter if it's morning or afternoon or evening? Okay. I do have a few spaces over lunch hour between 12 and 1. I think I have 2 days a week left. I'll have to check on my calendar. We can sort that out on the way out. So that might also be an option if you'd like to leave work and have a workout and then go back. Okay? So that completes our verbal assessment, where we complete all the paperwork, the physical activity readiness questionnaire, and the health history form. Is there anything else you would like to add, or any questions you would like to ask me? Okay, perfect. And of course, as I work on developing your program, you'll probably hear from me. I'll probably have more questions for you. So, great. Okay, so I'll stick this in your file, and I'll print off a copy of the PAR-Q there that the receptionist sent me, and I will put that in here as well. So one stays up at the front with the receptionist. It's like a little legal folder. All of them are up there. Every client that has walked through the doors, there is a copy up there. And then I always keep one in the client folder as well, just for quick access, okay? So, the last thing we need to do is schedule your next assessment, the second half of your assessment, where we take your vitals and do some measurements and some postural assessments and things like that. So that should take, I would allow 45 minutes to an hour. And we can do it this time next week if you like. Exact same day, same time, same bat time, same bat place. Okay, that's what we'll do. Okay, perfect. Well, it was very nice to meet you and get to know you a little bit better. I'm really excited about working with you, and I hope that you're excited about getting started on a new program and seeing some improvements in your fitness and reaching some goals. I love to see that as well. Like I said, I really, really want my clients to succeed. It's very important to me. So I will see you next week for your next assessment. Do make sure you drive safe, okay? Thanks. Bye-bye.